we go, my friends. This is Rick, the Fat Man, and we are here to take a review and look at Greater Harad. This is set in Middle Earth, Southern Middle Earth. It is from Iron Crown Enterprises, and one of those outside the box from the movie and Tolkien's works. There's very little information from Tolkien directly on this section of Middle Earth, and so majority of this stuff would have come from bits and pieces and the imaginations of the writers. Copyright 1990, so this particular installment came out in 1990. One of the things, like I said, I love about these books is a larger view of the Tolkien world, of Middle Earth in particular, but we see things, we understand things a little better. There's so little we know of the Easterlings and the Southrons and stuff that this are associated with, other than the fact that they march under the banner of Sirayn and are considered evil men. And I think that's being disingenuous and unfair in truth. Yeah, their motivations and maybe and who they're working for or who they're marching under the banner of could be in question, but to say that they're outright evil men, they're motivated by evil deeds and evil reasons, like they're just another version of an orc, is not fair. One of the things to take into account is typical of Middle Earth, just like it is of our real world. Certain areas think of themselves in a different and slightly better than other areas of the world. So in the Western, the Western Europe countries and stuff always look down their noses at the Central East and Middle East and Far Eastern races and countries as somehow being less civilized or less something. And in truth, a lot of times their history is actually much deeper. And there are elements of the human races in Middle Earth that predate their civilizations, or predate the Numerians. That they're the branch of the Edain that did not go west and fight in the wars of the Valarad and gain faith and fame and connectivity to the elves and so on and so forth. But this doesn't diminish them total. And then of course there's suggestions in the history that during the height of the Numerian power, many Numerian lords and what have you traveled throughout Middle Earth, established more, Tharbad is an example. Early Tharbad was established. Pelegar was established. Umbar, however you want to pronounce it, was established by the Numerians in their expansion stage long before Gondor and Arnor were settled. And they settled places much further east and south than Umbar. And directly involved themselves in the local politics and took over and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of bad blood between the East and the West. And then you add the convolutions of the ringwraiths before their ringwraiths. These kings of men who were given rings of power by Sauron and fell under his control. Originally were kings of men, and many of them came from these regions, and so there's deep history of anger and distrust, purposely and accidentally involved in why these southern races so despise Gondor and the men of the West. There's one of those things that Aragorn kind of learned. Is briefly mentioned because he spent some time as a young man traveling to these far countries to experience the greater world and the other peoples of other races of men, at the encouragement of Gandalf and Elrond, because if he was going to be a ruler of men, especially a ruler of the West, having that foreknowledge was going to be much beneficial for him in the long run if is successful in his quest of regaining the kingship of Gondor and Arnor. So we got our introduction. The south of the burning sands of the Herdwith lie the Greater Harad, and 7 cities of the Sirayn are the watered earth, the intellectual and economic hub of southern Middle Earth. So it goes, it says, although near Harad boasts the magnificent naval port of Umbar and Far Harad shuttles dazzling trade center of Dar, Greater Harad eclipses both of them with its size of its population, extent of its lands, and the rigors of its history. That's another thing to take into account when you look at the battle of the Pelennor fields and the sheer numbers of human races that fight on the side of Sirayn. They had to come from someplace, and these weren't just random tribes of men that lived in the tundra or the plains and were gathered together. These were sophisticated, well equipped, well armed, well trained armies of men who marched west to battle the evil Westernese, the evil Western men, the way they viewed them. So we got their history, tale of years, of course, going through the Second Age. Longest time of aligning the kings of Gondor's reckoning covered the Second and Third Age. Includes as important events in the history and of Sirayn and the surrounding lands, the calendar, blah blah, unification of peoples, blah blah blah. So lots of information, lots of good stuff here. The land of Sirayn, however you want to pronounce it how you want to pronounce it. Climate. Various lists. The Sarabast is a vast sunburned forest stretching from the junction. The Camelars comprise of two dissimilar, equally desolate areas. Think of, like I said, think of the Middle East. Think of Northern Africa, and you're not far from the mark of what the type of terrain and areas that we're looking at potentially. Flora and fauna. Areas, so the Isra, the Sarabask. I said here, numerous streams and small rivers fed by rainfall on the peaks. Water the foothills covered by the Sarabask. And inured to intense sunlight, moderated by little cloud cover. Scant rainfall, but abundant groundwater. The species comprise the wood are hardy in a select group. Figs, olives, cork, date, palms, tobacco trees, something similar to an olive but larger. Thrive on the lower slopes, large variety of scrub, brush, creek tangles between their trunks, etc., etc. So, like I said, the flora of the Chinnacat is typical of a semi-arid highland plateau. Fibrous grasses intermingle with nettles and gorse predominate. Different peoples, the Torvadic features of peoples and cultures. Although the citizens of city-states of Sirayn share many cultural similarities, the less civilized residents of the Kimlaran Hills, the Terbatark, and the Sarabask possess strikingly differences in background, way of life, and outlook. Varied peoples, the Greater Harad lifestyles are described below. So political structure, social structures, the I-10 people with dark hair and dark skin, both women, military structure. So this is one group. The Allegan is another group. The Anak, one of the most reclusive people of the Greater Harad. Norse folks, this is an offshoot of one of the seven Dwarven Lord tribes. Line of Dwarves, part of Barba's people, one of the original 7 tribes of the Nagrim. Nar was the second son of Bavor and left with a few followers and friends after murder of his father. Like other Malbad, the dwarves of the Yellow Mountains, Nar's folk further cool subterranean caverns to the bright southern sun, blah, blah. So then you got racial origins of parents, military structure, social structure, currency, housing, diet. Then we got the city dwellers, the riverine cities. The Sirayn are an oppressed people during their later history. Only free folk of them are in the Meztab, or the domain of the Might Lord, are the citizens of Tul Har. Anyway, parents, housing, diet, lots of information on these Easterlings. And it opens up and gives you a much deeper, richer backstory and backstop for other than just the term Easterling and a few glimpses we have in the movies. Appearances, housing, military structure, politics and powers, dark cults, organizations of free peoples, Army of the Southern Dragon. Caravan masters of Sirayn. People of note, so some significant NPCs. Here is Akhorahil, the black Nimrian mage sorcerer who eventually becomes the Ringwraith. Alright, so he sees Territorial and Theron or Lond. The notable elf knows that Terlon of Lon Erno is to the residents of Tolhar as a master of many thief of many faces. It's not interesting that there still are elven enclaves and throughout Middle Earth that are not connected to the Western elves, and some of them are leftovers Noldor that migrated east after the fall of the Bellarad. There's wood elves and things like this that never went west that still linger in smaller and smaller contingents. Eventually, after the fall of the ring, most of the Noldor returned to the Undying Lands, and from there on out, like the Western elves remain, they diminish and dwindle and go into hiding, and eventually are forgotten or lost altogether. But there's a few of them. Economic and trade, coin, imports, exports, elixirs and herbs. City of Tolpak. Nature of the city, housing around 18,000 residents. So these are significant sized cities, just like Peleger and a handful of the cities in the west. There's a lot more of them to the east. And we break down the 7 cities and their specifics. And I'm not going to try to read through everything here. Not to mention that I butcher the names and pronunciations terribly. I know what they sound like in my head when I read them, but it's much harder for me to get them out past my tangly, twisted tongue. So, it is what it is. To quote President Trump. City sites. The Blue Monkey, the Sunwad's Waters, Palace of Tol Arsa, runes, maps, 4 maps. Oh yeah, lots and lots of those. Drunken Hammer, the Taiyai Temple's outer court. Terran Bearson, Gerhabaris. There are also some scattering orcs, goblin tribes and stuff out in the region, but interestingly enough, there are far fewer numbers than there are what you find to the west, according to the Greater Harad. The Tomb of Cathed design. Here's an orc stronghold. The Bar Fallon. Akhorahil. Items of power. Raiders on, so we got some adventures. Raiders on the high seas, basically, and be a pirate or fight against the pirates. Quest for the Southern Hammer. Find this artifact. Heir to the throne. The artifact plays a heart in. Cryptic Carthage Zazen, the middle. Strong group of adventurers familiar with travel underground and knowledgeable undead. Always nice. Ruined bridges of Charn Sirah. Other Greater Harad at other times. Master NPC table, Master Beast table, etc., etc. Like I said, what I like about these kind of additions to MERP is that it gives us a window, a wider range of the cultures that are present in Middle Earth other than what we're familiar with in the West. And it gives us a deeper understanding and appreciation for those eastern and southern foes that plague Gondor and Rohan and places further west. It gives us an understanding and place reference. Whether you play in the, if your campaign takes your characters, your player characters to these areas, so be it, and now you have good information to use. Or if you're characters are encountering NPCs, or perhaps even player characters playing one of these Eastern and Southern peoples as a character class. Gives much more depth to your campaign. And then, just as a pleasure, if you don't play the game, but you like reading the books and watching the movies, these things are great source material because they give you a deeper understanding, or at least a perceived understanding of those very things and places and references we see. So when we talk about the Easterlings, and when Frodo and Sam and Gollum are hiding from the Easterlings that are marching to the gates of Mordor, and we see their faces and their swarthy look, but if you look at their equipment, these are not crude people. These are not poor people. These people are well established. These people have high technology, high middle-age technology for the production of pretty elaborate and consistent armor and weapons and the little bits and bits and pieces and stuff that make up their wardrobe. All this stuff is refined. It's not something that was provided to them. And they have organization, they have training, they have discipline, they have arrogance, which implies a sense of superiority and feeling. So you can see it in their faces and their eyes and their structures. Now, as opposed to say the later in the Lord of the Rings, when we see the attack on Minas Tirith, and the Rohan comes up against the world, the Mumakil and that branch of the Easterlings who are manning them. Some of them with their tattoos and their pretty ragged looks have a much more aggressive, maybe a little more primitive look about them. But if you look at the soldiers manning those elephant towers and things like that, these are not primitive peoples. And this is a great explanation and help guide for us to understand that and understand who these people are. So, this is Rick, and this is the Greater Harad. Game on, my friends. Game on.